Hi, how you doing and welcome back to a video on the channel. What we have for you today is a bit of a different video. It's our season review of the whole year in FPL, the high points, the low points, a few select game weeks along the way, and really just a recap of what led me to my 25k overall rank by the end of the season. And it is my best rank ever in FPL, so I thought it was worth recapping, documenting, and just thoughts and things I learned along the way. Let's take a look at game week 1. So as we get the team on the board, it is important to notice that some of the players are red flagged and yellow flagged. This is what they are right now, not what they were at the time. And from my original squad, I think I was right with a lot of the players. Like Foden, he was second overall in points. Saka was fifth overall. Watkins was third overall. Haaland was fifth overall. And Onana was actually third highest point scoring keeper. And Saliba was the second highest point scoring defender. Now, looking back at the pre-season predictions, players like Foden and Watkins, who we said would do really well, we got spot on. And someone like Foden, we were umming and ahhing, we were saying, this could be the year where Foden has a breakout season. And, fair play, he did. And, we were right with that prediction. Some of these players didn't do that well. And someone like Rashford and Reece James definitely didn't last in the team too long. But overall, I'm really happy with how we sort of did our research at the start of the year and set ourselves up well for a good season. Special shout out to Mbeumo as well, who actually got 9 returns in his first 11 game weeks. And he was a bit of a 50-50 decision. I think there was a couple of other players who you could have got in at the time, and Mbeumo really got us that good head start. Also, if you remember back in game week 1, Nathan Ake, we brought him in at the deadline because there was a lot of miscommunication, a lot of uncertainty about which Man City defenders were going to be starting. And I think players like Stones and Ruben Dias missed out in game week 1. And it's a bit of a similar situation with Saliba because a lot of people went for Gabriel and he didn't even start until game week 4. So we got a really good start with game week 1. So we're going to jump all the way up to game week 11. And we've got to put these teams in this discussion because game week 11 was my lowest game week score of the season, apart from blank game week 29, where we went from 21k all the way down to 50k-ish, just inside the top 50k. And I think if you'd have set me the challenge to get the lowest score possible in that game week, I don't think I could have done any better than this team right here. I think a lot of the players just either didn't play or they blanked, and Lascelles actually was my highest scoring player with 9 points on the bench. Onana was my starting keeper, and he was actually the highest scoring player who contributed to the score. Haaland himself didn't even get 4 points. He ended up just getting 1 point. We doubled it for captaincy. And there was just no returns to be had. Thankfully, these game weeks were few and far between. I think everyone's going to have them throughout the season. But the most important thing is that they don't happen every other game week. And in this game week, you can see by the average points that a lot of players didn't score very well as well. So it actually didn't put me too far back overall. But that game week rank of 9.5 million is not a good game week rank in order to be successful. So it's kind of amazing we did end up with the occasional rank like that and still did quite well in our season. And the reason for that is that we bounced back straight away in game week 12. So it was my best game week rank of the entire season at 59,000. This and game week 1 were actually my only game week ranks below 300k at this stage, which, you think there'd be more of than when you're at a top 10k rank. You think you'd have a lot of really good game week scores. It's not always the case. I think it's much better to be consistent rather than have a lot of really high game week ranks and really low game week ranks. I think if you can maintain that sort of solid, 500,000 game week rank every game week, you're going to get a good score overall. And this was a great example of our best score of the season. Even though we did have, 1 or 2 players still having some blanks, the captaincy really mattered and there were some good returns elsewhere. So straight into game week 17 here, and we stayed roughly around the 10k mark until this game week where I hit my highest rank of the season, and it was my highest rank ever of 4.5k overall. And despite a captaincy blank as well, it was one of the rare weeks where defenders paid off, and at this point I'm buzzing, and I think you're thinking, maybe I could win FPL because it's not too early on. It's game week 17. We're almost halfway through the season. And you can kid yourself into thinking that everything's going to go swimmingly from that point onwards. And it's definitely better to be at a good game week rank any game week than a lower game week rank. But you kind of lose yourself and you allow yourself to dream and think, maybe I could win FPL. And there's so many more variables that you need to take into account. And as we'll see, there were some down points along the way. So we'll jump forward to game week 22. And from this point, there was a slight decline. Really, this was the lowest rank for the rest of the season from this point. And at the time, I think in 5 game weeks, I'd gone from 4,000 to 70,000, which is still a brilliant game overall rank. It's 70k. But when you're at 4k a few weeks before, you start panicking a little bit and you're thinking, I'm letting it all slide, I'm ruining it. And you could be aware that you're about to bottle a really good season. But we did bounce around the 30 to 40k overall rank until, about game week 32 and 35, where we were top 20k for 4 weeks. And with 3 weeks to go, we were 15k. So let's take a look at this team. And at game week 35, like we said, 15,000th in the world. And really good effort. And I think if you'd have said to me, with 3 game weeks to go, you'd be 15k, I would absolutely have bitten your hand off. And it's such a brilliant rank. And at this point, you're thinking, right, okay, it's not like game week 17 where you're 4,000 overall and there's more than half a season to go. This is 3 game weeks. And I was a bit unfortunate because I'd had some red arrows from this point and I'd kind of let my rank slip a little bit. And it was because I took a bit of a risk captaining Isak in game week 36. Where although he scored and got an assist, he also missed a penalty. And it was the same game week where Haaland scored 4 goals, including 2 pens. And you just think, in another game week, Haaland doesn't get those 2 pens or maybe even misses one. And Isak scores his. And actually, I've done better than all the Haaland captain players. I also didn't have Nicholas Jackson, who I think got 16 points that game week as well. So in game week 36, I did have a bit of a sharp decline to about the 40k mark. And it led me to, I had a bit of a rise in game week 37, but in game week 38 was a really good rank. And I went up about 15k. And going into the final game week, I was a bit like, right, what's my ceiling? What's my floor? I was thinking if I could stay top 40k, I would take that. I think realistically, there's a lot of teams, everyone at that rank who was really an engaged manager. It's hard to gain rank, so possibly I could get, top 30k at a push. I didn't think I would get to the 25k overall rank, and it was down to some really good individual players like Pedro Porro. Foden scored 2 goals. I know a lot of people played Gabriel and a Chelsea defender. I decided to bench him. I just thought those games would be a bit all over the place and very unlikely to keep clean sheets. And they started someone like Gabriel ahead of Pedro Porro. And I was really sort of set on Pedro Porro. We did try and get in Trent, but we ended up getting in Robertson instead. And it really paid off because he kept a clean sheet. No attacking returns, but did get 2 bonus points. Alexander Isak made up for, any sort of disappointment we'd had in earlier game weeks. But really, even with a Haaland blank captaincy, it does go to show that even if your captaincy blanks, if there's a safety in numbers with a lot of other players at that similar rank, it's not going to affect your overall score too much. So the things that I've learned in this FPL season is really you've got to try and get a good start. I think for me, there's so much more variance early in the season, and there's a lot of players who are sort of not that clued up on what's going on, they're not that sort of engaged managers, and you can kind of take advantage of that and get some really good ranks. By the time you get to the end of the season, last few game weeks, everyone's, let's say, in the top 500k is still playing FPL pretty intently. I would go as far as saying the top, 2 million. Probably everyone is really focused on FPL. And a lot of the teams are quite similar, so it's really difficult to get that edge. And it's definitely a lot easier to slip down the ranks as well. If you take a risk and it doesn't pay off, you're losing rank, and it's so hard to gain that rank back on everyone else. Also learned that captaincy matters. And it's really hard to predict and sounds super obvious, but if you can nail your captaincy more often than not, and if you take a look through all your ranks for the season, I bet it's not very often your captain player was your highest scoring player that game week. And it does go to show that if you did nail your captaincy every game week, it would really shoot you up the ranks. I would also be aware of highly owned players who are owned by FPL managers around the rank you're at. Because I think sometimes, especially later in the season, we get caught up in overall ownership. But a lot of the players who own those players, they're not playing FPL anymore. They're kind of like, they're just sort of teams that aren't really being focused on. They've just been left to sort of for the next season. And so I think really what you want to be looking at is if you're in the top 100k, right, how many players in the top 100k own this player? How many are trying to captain them? And kind of just finding out that bit more specific information. Early on in the season, it's a bit different because a lot of players are still playing. But towards the end, you can kind of get lost a bit by looking at overall ownership and things like that because a lot of those managers aren't that engaged in the game. So in terms of players of the season for me, I think Foden's got to be up there. We absolutely banked on him early on and he delivered consistently throughout the season. We had both his hat-tricks. And I would also give Watkins a shout out as well. He was my player of the season just because he was so consistent and he went down, I think, to 7.9, 7.8 million at one point and we stuck with him. And we kept him all the way back up to 9 million and got all those points. And also someone like Onana, rather than having a sort of a really cheap keeper or someone from the expensive, one of the expensive keepers, he was really consistent in terms of save points this season. And whilst Man United didn't have a good season overall, I think it was something that is worth noting that if your keeper can get a lot of save points, eventually they will keep some clean sheets and then they'll get bonus points as well because they're so active within those games. So yeah, also Saka, we had Saka a lot of the season, took him out towards the end and kind of benefited from that because he didn't play in game week 38, but he was in my team for a lot and it was a tough decision to take him out. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Also want to say a big thank you just to everyone that's engaged with the channel this season. Really looking forward to next season as well. We are going to try and review our Premier League predictions, which was a bit of a different video at the start of the season, and see how well we did with predicting the finishing places for the Premier League. And yeah, really appreciate all the support. The subscriber count is, I think we've got over 100 subscribers this season compared to what we had last season. And, really appreciate it because we are a small channel trying to grow. So hopefully we can keep it going next season. I hope you have a great summer and I will see you in the next one.